Hi, I'm Dean Kelly. I'm a recruitment entrepreneur. I've been in recruitment for nearly 20 years now. I've built some recruitment businesses, sold them. I've delisted from the stock market and been a CEO of a PLC at the ripe age of 30. Now I invest in recruitment companies and rec tech businesses. And I think I probably, like most people, got into recruitment by accident. I was training to be a surveyor. I bumped into an old chum who was doing recruitment and wearing nice shoes, flash shirt, and a big suit with a big watch, and wanted to know what he did. And he told me he did recruitment, so I had a little look and bounced around a little bit, found a few different markets that seemed interesting, and settled with, back in the day, Computer Futures, where I met my now business partner, Gary Goldsmith. So pure accident, wasn't very good to start off with, probably a very, very hard worker. I think I was noted for that many times, and I think if I hadn't been the hardest worker in the room, I'd probably got a sack in the first 6 months. Yeah, I was definitely flying by the seat of my pants, but the penny didn't take long to drop. So yeah, that was my entry into recruitment. There was no science behind it, just pure accident. I cut my teeth at Computer Futures. I think back then it was a nice little epoch. There was a moment in time there where I worked with, well, I still think some of the most amazing recruiters I've ever worked with in the whole industry. And that for me was a real training ground. I went on from there. It's like, I suppose, like spending your time with the SAS and then going out into the field, which is what it felt like. And I went to another business, Paragon, went in there, changed markets, it was 99, and like anybody who's changing markets, then you tell everybody you were doing e-commerce, and I did. So yeah, did e-commerce, smashed it up, had a great time, massive billings, accidentally got interviewed by the Evening Standard. Don't know how they got my name, but from one of my own clients, which when he read it in the Evening Standard, he actually phoned me up to say I've just spat my coffee out across the desk. But yeah, I got interviewed on Is the Internet Too Hot to Handle? So I was in the old pink pages, gave my opinion, said it was. I think when I gave that interview, I probably had a few vodka Red Bulls at lunchtime as well. And from there, after some serious billing, I got headhunted to go to a new business that I think had been going 3 or 4 months called Dream IT. They've not been very successful in terms of the startup and getting it off the ground. Being the kind of confident position I was in at the time as a big biller, I told them that was easy stuff for me. You know, chuck me in at deep end, divisional manager, director in a year, and I'll grow your business. So at the end of the first year, we sat at about 42 people, which was, looking back, astronomical. At the time, I had no idea whether or not I was doing it right or wrong, but really had a good time. Learned a lot, actually, from the people around me, and how to grow a team and the kind of culture, and I think that was the biggest thing that I found about, if you can create a culture, you can grow teams, grow successful teams, and grow really, really fast. And just before I left there, and that was only kind of 13 months or so, like everybody, had a bit of a disagreement over shares, not vesting, and legal documents taking their time to get across. Rather than stick around and continue that argument, I decided that I would go off and do it on my own. And while I was thinking about that, I met somebody that was doing education recruitment. Not heard of it before, just thought they were the old people that they kept down the end of the corridor in the cupboard, to wheel them out and talk about World War II, and that's what I experienced at school. Had a conversation, they explained to me how the market worked, kind of commissions they were paid, a pound's a pound, but they just weren't earning anywhere near as much as you'd earn in IT for generating the same sort of money. And we decided to have a look at it. So we set that up very, very quickly at Dream. That became Dream Education. That business is now Savoca, so that business carried on growing and floated on AIM. And I went off to set up an education recruitment business, which I did in October 2002, the 16th of October to be exact. And I set up the Kelly's Group, which was just purely an education business, but we did a bit of IT at the beginning just to get ourselves some cash in and get up and running. I think I always knew I wanted to do it. I got sold the dream. You know, I was a huge biller in my second year of recruitment, so I'd never earned that sort of money. A council estate boy from North London, driving brand new BMW convertible at 23 years old, and you're thinking, you know, life can't get much better, but it could, and the work was hard, and I enjoyed it, but I had my head filled with this. Well, if you own 2.5% of this business and we sell it for 100 million, that's 2.5 million to you. You know, at 24, 25 years old, that's quite a story to spin back then as well. You know, things were still on Rolodexes and whatever else. So I started to think bigger, and I started to think that I could achieve bigger things than initially you probably thought when you're late teens and your early 20s. So I just don't think also I was very good at having a boss. I learned from people, but I always saw them as just a measure of somebody that I wanted to beat. So once I'd taken all your knowledge, I was then going to improve on that and I was going to transcend everything you did. And that's unfortunately still how I live today, which my wife said is a very hard thing to live with. When you're never happy, you always got to be better. So it was always a case that I was going to do something. I can't say I knew what. It wasn't a business plan in the back pocket that said, right, you need to do this, this and this. It's a very iterative process, as you'll know from running a tech business. I don't think back then when you're setting up a business, you look at it as an iterative process. It's now agile because we've got a world of tech, and we kind of look back and say, well, actually, I was doing that anyway. So I was learning every single day, and I just thought, hold on, I can do this better than them. They're not going to give me the shares. Did they give me the shares? Maybe I'd have lasted a little bit longer, but you know, whether they sold the company or not, who knows? I might have got itchy feet anyway, but it was a good time for me to leave and spread my wings and just take that little bit I'd learned and throw it in. But you know, you continue to make mistakes on a daily basis. Looking back, because I'm setting up a few businesses, as you know now, as I invest in businesses and do some stuff myself. Looking back, it felt far easier than it did now. You know, I know so much more now. There isn't anything I don't know in terms of what I need to set up a business, what the deals look like, and who to speak to. That bit's easy. Back then, I didn't know, but I think I had the energy of youth, and so I can't remember it being a struggle. Going without salary, you know, just the hardships that you do when you set up a company, you'll know very well yourself. I don't remember any of that being a pain. You know, the 2-3 hours sleep at night, getting up, writing business plans. You know, I only get 5 now, but you know, back then it was less. And I think energy, you know, timing. I can't say whether the timing was great or not. You know, it looks back, and I think, you know, we did very, very well, very, very quickly. But all I can say is in that period of time, you know, I sold that business within 3 years. We were the fastest growing education recruitment business in the country by far. We took an IT mentality into that. My consultants earn on average 3 times what other education recruitment consultants earn. When we were acquired, the business that acquired us had a very large education recruitment business that turned over about 3 times what we turned over. And bear in mind, their consultants earn a third of what my consultants earn. We still made 2.5 times the profit that they made. So yeah, looking back, it was very successful, but you don't have that yardstick because you haven't, I think at that age, when you're sub 30, you probably haven't got to know people in the market as well as you do when you're a little bit older, and you've kind of got to that position where your peer group aren't so protective and they're sharing information. So you don't know if you're doing well. You always pick up the paper or the editorials in the recruitment magazines, and you think, God, they must be doing so much better than we're doing because of the way they're selling themselves. But that's the perception. And looking back, no wonder everyone was knocking on our door after 2 years trying to acquire us. If I'm completely honest, I wouldn't have sold the business purely because we were making good money ourselves. You can always have another car, a house, a boat, and those sorts of things. But in reality, you kind of end up buying those sorts of things because people expect you to buy those sort of things, and you think you should. When your reason to be is what you do every single day. It's what I got up for. It's what I bounced out of bed for. It was the driving force of the business. I think probably because myself and my business partner were very similar recruiters. We've both been big billers, both been IT, and you know, you sit there and you've got this equation, right, you're big bad cop, I'll be good cop, we'll do this, we'll do that. And actually it reversed itself immediately within a week of starting this business. He ended up doing the back office, you know, working with accountant, you know, small business, not a lot to do, depends on tables and stuff. I originated all the things we did. We come up with some very, very new solutions. We were the only people to put a solution into 12 authorities across the country. Still to this day, no one else has ever managed that. I won within 6 weeks of starting the business. I'd won 1 local authority in the country, and I'd won the largest independent educator in the world, a group called GEMS. Now GEMS, as I quite like to point out when I see Sunny Varkey, the chairman, now and then, that when I met him, he was worth $500 billion, and now he's worth $2.6 billion. And I think there's a correlation there. I think some of my entrepreneurial skills may have rubbed off on him. But yeah, we rose very, very quickly. So people were banging on our door, offering us lots of money. You get your head full of information from corporate finance and banks because they've all got a pound to make out of you. And you're being told if you're part of this bigger unit, this acquisition vehicle that's sitting on AIM, banging on 100 million, you will be a more powerful unit. And you're going up against big businesses thinking, well, they're winning these accounts and these tenders because they've got great accounts and they're huge and they've got scale, and so the risk is smaller for them. And we're an SME and they're not letting us bang through the door. We've got to be more malleable and fluid and sneak around the back and do things very differently. But the reality of it is that these big machines, you know, they don't do enjoyable business, right? They don't enjoy what they do on a daily basis. It's very regimented, tick box exercises. And when we were acquired, I look back and I think, actually, the day I received all the money, or the initial instalment of money from acquiring my business, I think was one of the worst days for me, because it felt like somebody kicked me in the stomach and mugged me on the street, you know. But in reverse, they'd taken all my things I liked and just put a few quid in my pocket, and they took all that sentimental value. So yeah, it was great. We sold. I think looking back, I was kind of blinded by it all, rather than taking a step back and looking at it and saying, right, why do I do this? And I think that's something I've carried with me since as well. And I think at the beginning, you all know, when you see people in recruitment and they first start, they're fluffy. Right, oh, that deal means so much to you, your first, second, third deal. And especially when you're jumping a bracket in commission, it means a lot. Your team leader bowls over, they close the deal for you, and you think, oh, they're a hero. But that deal doesn't matter to them. Right, so they'll push the boundaries a little bit further. They'll try things that you wouldn't necessarily try early on. And that's the experience that you gain, that's the empiricism that you're going to get over a period of time, where you can make more confident decisions because you know where those boundaries are. And I think because I'd had relative success within my first 3 years of recruitment, you know, going from a year of learning and really hard time to then really the penny dropping and getting where I need to be, then going to one of the biggest billers in the country, then setting up another business and growing it to 40 odd people. I think my balls were bigger than my head, right? So initially I just thought, well, what's to stop me going from the top? So I aimed high. I ended up, I aimed for government, I aimed for MPs, I aimed for the chairman of GEMS, and I got him. Got his mobile number, I spent one evening just ringing around. He invited me to have breakfast with him in Dorchester the next day, which I did. He keeps 3 suites there all year round, which I'm sure is about 20 grand a week. And on the table, actually, when I got there, to unnerve me, was a proposal from Serco and a proposal from Capita. I didn't even have a first quarter's accounts, right? Okay, so I sat there and yeah, he asked me to pitch, but pitch me, why he should do business with me. And as an entrepreneur, it was quite different from the tick box exercises that you get in public sector, whereas they'll get to the point and you might be the best option, but nobody gets sacked for employing IBM or Capita or whatever else. They're so risk averse and they don't like to make decisions and whatever else, where everything sat with this one chap. So once I'd won that, actually, I think you see the power of network, the power of how you leverage other individuals. So he was in Tony Blair, Bill Clinton. You know, Dean, do you want to speak to these people? Right? Do you know what? Yeah, why not? Right, we'll have those conversations. And I think you come with a confidence that you realise that most people sit there with confidence and don't always know what they're doing behind the scenes. You know, there's a veneer deep confidence there, and I think that was the bit that kind of spearheaded it for us and made us successful. And we learned along that route. And once you'd learned stuff, and you'd listen to other very intelligent people telling you about what they did in the market, you could join the dots. And I think recruiters do that really well, because we're a matching process. We work with the behaviours and the behavioural science of individuals without kind of looking at it in that fashion. We take correlating points and we create emotive connections. And once you've made that emotive connection, you've closed from the beginning, right? So a bad close is where you're slamming the phones, picking them up and arguing over a few pounds here and there. A good close is where you close it at the beginning, right? And that's what I learned to do, was that I could take good information from all of these people and I could do the correlating factors and just take them on a journey. And so once you got one and you got two, within 18 months we had 12 local authorities in the country signed up and 60 to 70% of all their schools working via us, set up a managed service scheme as well as our contingent reactive scheme. And I had the Capitas and the teaching personnels, the biggest agencies in the country at the time, the ITNs and others all working via me. Right, so they had to come to me for business. And that was a nice feeling. And again, that boosts your confidence and you go after doing different things. We did environment mapping. So we came up with some tools that today still has 100% success rate on senior leadership appointments. Behavioural science before anybody had even kind of given it a name. We came up with bundles. You know, I worked out with schools, I sat down and did their budgets with them and worked out what they could afford to spend, because they worked on cash rather than accruals on their allocations. And I had schools paying me a year in advance. And for that, it wasn't about getting something cheaper. Right? It was all about what else can I give you for that service. If I have to reduce my overhead of phoning you all the time and trying to convince you on spot business or convince you that my person's better than somebody else, but I can actually put in the groundwork and the effort and show you before that why somebody is better than somebody else and what we do to support that individual and what we do to make that an easy process for you, Think about the time savings and everything else. And then we did audits. We did time audits, we did saving audits, and within our first local authority, which was London Borough of Harrow, within the first 18 months, we saved them £1.1 million on supply across their schools. The amazing factor is that today, because of the changes and the way they do things, they carry on just repeating themselves. There's madness within that market, and they continue to lose money in very bad ways and diminish quality because they squeeze margins. But I think when you've had those stepping stones of success and it's not really been, didn't feel like it was that hard. You know, it felt like people were there to look for something new, and we've done that. I think that's the bit that drives you on. So aiming for the top, and then understanding what those top people view, and then taking that down was the way we went about it, and still do. The one thing everybody's always said about me is I'm a grafter. You know, I wasn't a natural salesperson. I mean, in fact, my dad spent 1.5 years trying to convince me that sales wasn't me and that I should drop it. Yeah, I rub that in his face now. So, and he was adamant because the people he knew were salespeople sold Mondeos and and they were shoving things down your throat. So hard work was how I learnt my skills, and I think it's that nowadays we can look at books and we can read stuff on the internet and say, well, 10,000 hours and it's the tipping point. You know, I still get up at 4:30 in the morning. I don't go to bed as late as I used to, but I'm still going to bed somewhere between the 10-11 mark and sometimes a bit later. But I'd go to bed, I'd get up, I kept a notepad, I'd write things. So I would time manage my whole day to make sure that I did everything I needed to do, carry things forward that I did, very basic stuff, everyone does this. But I would also then find other points in the day where I wasn't encroaching on anybody else's time. That's my planning time, that's my thinking time. I go to the gym, and when I'm in the gym, I might be exercising, but it's not hard for me because I'm thinking business. I'm thinking, right, how can I make that work? What hasn't somebody else thought of that can make that? I'm not out for reinventing the wheel, I'm just out for making things better. So you can be smart, the Alex Ferguson saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't want to work hard, but if you've got both, you can be a superstar. I think it's just you've got to keep that energy and motivation going, and for that, as we'll go back to the cynic thing, but it's understanding why you do it, and that's the bit that jumps me out of bed every day. Expectations were probably phenomenally high. When I talk to people now and I go into businesses and I talk about the expectations I set for my individuals, it scares most of them. Where in terms of what I expected my people to generate in terms of business and in terms of margins and everything else was far greater. I mean, actually, when looking back, it was obviously successful because in the last 2 education businesses I sold, the average billings in both of those businesses, the first one being far greater, I mean, it was double the average billings of any other kind of player in the market at the time. But when we look at the average billings of the larger business I just sold, again, on average, we were a third higher than any other real education recruiter. Everyone has a few big billers, but on average, we were all good. And what it was is that it was more the expectation that if you were working that hard, right? If you were working in our environment, and I never had issues hiring people, I had people banging on my door for jobs, because of the environment we created. It was a real fun place to work. But we worked from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, every day without fail, except for Mondays. We worked at 6:30, we had to get in because we had a morning meeting 6:30 to 7. And yes, you get a few people who feel a bit tired on a Monday morning, but once you get the energy and vibe of the room, they got carried away with it. And what I would say to the lower performers would have a conversation and say, look, you work all these hours, you work under the pressure of working with me, I expect a huge amount and I give a huge amount back, and that was always the reciprocation they got, that I would always give and I would always be on hand. They could phone me anytime they wanted, over the weekends or whatever else, right? I was there for them all the time, but I expected something back for that if I was going to put myself on the line for them. At that level, you can go and work, you can go and get a job in a local council, or you can go and be a bus driver and earn that sort of money and have a lot less stress than I was giving you on a daily basis. And so what we generally did was just have conversations. I didn't ever have to fire anyone. Everyone was always upset because they had to go. But if you deal with that in the right way, that actually there's better places. There's other agencies you can go to that don't expect what I expect, and I'm not going to give you a bad reference. You're just not made out for us. Everybody else picks up their game. And the way we run our talent pool and in terms of how your career went, that was always a case of you were aiming for my job. okay? And that we laid down how that worked, and we'd say, right, okay, you need to do this to go to the next stage and that to go to the stage after that. There was clarity of goal. If you wanted something, it was down there. You knew what you had to do to achieve that. And the person behind me, so my directors behind me, their job was to know more than me, to be better than me, and to take my job, right? Because it was the right people, right jobs. No nepotism in our businesses at all, and there never has been. If ever there was anybody better than somebody else, then they got a chance for that role. So my expectations were always high, but they were clear. And and I can't say it didn't work. I can't say that it worried anyone, because the performance always, and actually even going back to Dream, performance was unbelievable. It was, I think, my opinion anyway, and it might be a bit old-fashioned in certain things, but I'm definitely not an old-fashioned person when I look at the things that I do in businesses, and people say to me, it's quite advanced and nobody else has come up with that. But in terms of how I believe people are, you interview a recruiter and they tell you they want money. Like, I want loads of money and whatever else. But money doesn't make you happy. You can't cuddle it. I've tried. If I give you £1 million and said, here you go, you'd smile at me. But if I said you couldn't spend it, it's just paper. Right? There's nothing there. It gives you options. And I always say to people, it's Bahamas or Butlins. But people buy certain things that other people just think I wouldn't spend my money on. But it's about those options. But that gives you something to do, and that gives you something to aim for and aspire to. But deep down, it's always about kudos. It's about how everybody else feels about you, or you perceive they feel about you, and where you sit in your social circle or within that room and whatever else. So if you give somebody the tools to be better, and you give them the motivation to be better by understanding what their options are, if they don't want to be better, then it's just not the right job for them, right? Okay, they're those places for people like that. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just not where they should be. And the key was finding those people who want to be motivated. Because I tell you what, once you push that button, it's contagious. Attitudes are contagious. You get everybody rowing the same way, and everybody ups their game, and you will be the best in your market, and you will start to transcend anybody else that's playing the same game. The only time I lost good people is when those hours changed and the environment changed and the culture changed, and that's when we were acquired. So as soon as we were acquired, it was okay. We were acquired by a business that then issued a 2-year profit warning, that then got rid of the chairman, and so the share price went down. It had £30 million worth of debt. It was 6 times over leveraged. So essentially, it's your mortgage is 6 times more than your earnings, and in terms of the cash to pay that off, our debt repayments, essentially our mortgage, the way the banks were charging us was about 10 or 11% on that debt as well. So as I've always said to people, I offered you a mortgage at 10%, you tell me where to go. And when we got involved in that business, and it was, it seemed like a good move at the time. And a bit of advice to anybody is, when somebody acquires your business, just because they're bigger than you, just because they've got a checkbook, do your DD on them. Okay, you need to do the acquirer DD. Right? You need to have a look at them and see where they are as a business, not just that they've got the money to acquire you at that time, because what happens afterwards is generally just as important as what happened before. And for us, it was a really, really bad move. But we got involved in that, and we decided to take care of that. I ended up taking over that company and becoming the CEO of that board. But the initial stages for the initial 6 to 9 months, all of my top billers who were outstripping the rest of the industry, having an amazing time, enjoying coming to work, banging on a door for us to unlock it every morning, suddenly lost their mojo. They didn't like the environment, they didn't like the pressure, because it was a different kind of pressure. They didn't like the fact we had a massive HR department and a legal department telling us we couldn't do all the things that recruiters used to do back in the day to have fun, because HR didn't like it. And they stopped overnight. DJ decks, in the office, the beers at 3 o'clock, the fun and games of calling people out, P45 in a hat, which people can ask about offline. So all these fun things, well, I enjoyed them, that actually my guys and girls at the time called for. I lost my big billers over that, and they actually went and set up another company with my blessing, and actually with some friendly advice here and there. I wasn't giving away too much stuff. They'd worked with me for long enough to create the same environment. That's why they left. They were desperate for me to come with them. I couldn't do that. I couldn't. I'd taken on investment. I'd taken on some outside investment to help turn around the company, and I had to stay there and do what I'd tell people I was going to do. But looking back, nobody, absolutely nobody. They left to get that culture back. It's a little bit horses for courses, because you may start a business because you've got 1 or 2 great clients, and they're great clients because you have that affinity and rapport with them. When I went into Dream, I was told I didn't have to bill. that they wanted me just to manage and grow the team and be inspiring and all those great things, right? But I'd only been in recruitment 2 and a bit years. And so the people that I went in to manage straight away had double my time in recruitment. I looked about 8. So at the time it was very much, who are you? What can you possibly tell me? And in reality, probably not a lot, because I only had 2 years worth of experience, although I thought there was a fair bit I could tell them. So the way to get respect was to bill. So even though I grew that company quite fast, we got lots of people in there, I billed for fun. Right? Still probably billed about 300 odd grand, just mucking around, throwing a few deals over my shoulders here and there. Because the confidence I think would have drifted if I hadn't have done that, because I hadn't had that experience in the market as yet. When I went in to set up Kellis, I didn't really bill in sense of banging a phone, asking to place an individual. What I did do was I made sure I went out at the higher levels. I'm a big believer, you have no assets in a recruitment business, you only have people. You're only as good as your people. And if you're not selling, I really don't know what else you're doing. If I'm selling to you as a consultant, I'm selling you the why, the dream, what this could be for you, why this is a great place to work. If I'm selling to my managers and directors, I'm blue skying, I'm telling them where we're going to go, I'm giving them the clarity of goal for their career. If I'm selling to the outside world, then no one can sell my business like I sell my business. You know, my passion and my energy sits deep inside, but my knowledge for what it is, what it could be, and actually your ability to make those decisions on the future of your business on the spot when asked. So many of the things I come up with was when I was put into a corner, and they said, right, well, how are you going to deal with this? Well, I'll tell you what else we do. And there was the idea, right? Okay, went back, formulated that, and we engaged and delivered it. So I don't think I've ever not billed. I don't see it as not billing. The only time I didn't bill for a bit, a business went seriously backwards, and that's when I became a CEO of a PLC, and I was wheeled around to institutions to deal with the asset managers who own shares in our business, to tell them I can't say anything because it's a closed period or the accounts aren't out or whatever else, so they can see me and see the whites of my eyes. And almost become an accountant. You know, that's what they want you to do when you go on a board. You want to become an accountant because you need to answer questions of what went on in the past, not what you're going to do in the future. They don't really care because shareholder value in a lot of these businesses is about what it looks like today. Okay, yes, you buy in because you think there's uplift, but if it goes backward a little bit, they're very, very hard to sell the investor saves. We're going to go backwards to go forwards. So for me, you know, that's probably the only time I didn't bill and or work different levels of selling. And at that point in time, the business struggled. It kind of plateaued. We always have billing managers. So again, there becomes a point where you're managing hands-on a daily basis that you probably do step away from the phones, but you're still engaged. You're still involved with dealing with those individuals. You should never leave a consultant having a real great portfolio of 3 or 4 accounts where they've got all the business, because actually they're either going to hold you over a barrel or when they walk it's going to be a real pain for you. You should be out engaging at the higher level with the gravitas that you have, that you've earned by becoming a manager or a director with those businesses. You should be out there talking to them. So I expect everybody to be aspirant. I expect them to want to do more, and to do that isn't just nursemaiding a bunch of consultants, making sure they're all right and they've got a pen and a paper and their CRM works. You should make them better on a daily basis. That's your job. If you can't, then you're no good at that job. You should be out there talking to their clients, finding out how you can expand and leverage on that relationship, not how we can maintain it. So you should always be selling. I just think the sale point of entry is very different. For me, you can have the best business plan in the world and you can execute it poorly and it won't work. You can have a really, really poor business plan and execute it with energy and gusto and the kind of foresight that others don't have in terms of you're going to be successful no matter what, so that every objection you receive is just an instruction on how to get around it. If you do that, you will always get somewhere. And if along the way you learn a lot of things and then you can produce a business plan that allows you to up your levels and deal with people that expect certain things from you, do that. But don't sit around saying, I need this business plan to be in place, I need this to be in place, I need that to be in place. The difference between a successful entrepreneur and someone who had a plan is that this successful entrepreneur actually executed it and went after it. If you wait around for that idea to be perfect, it's gone. Someone else has done it. And I think looking back That's what I did. When you invest in, it's very different, right? So if I invest in somebody, I want a business plan because I don't live and breathe their business on a daily basis. I want to know that they understand it. And you can write a business plan about what you do. But I think create a culture from day one. Don't give everybody a cuddle and say, look, we're a really great band of people, because actually when you do need to enter those KPIs, when you do need to be more efficient, when you do need to change the way they work, it's going to be really hard. As a cultural change, you'll find your business goes backwards before it goes forward. So going in, undercutting margins, this gig economy, deflationary market that we all live in, where everyone's in a race to the bottom, absolute rubbish. Okay? If you are good at what you do, there's a fair and equitable rate for that. And believe in it. Don't go in there just trying to undercut the market, and I've never done that. People are the lifeblood of what you do in recruitment, and generally recruitment companies grow by FTE. You have to take people on. I would never set a hard, concrete, hard, steadfast way of saying, this month I'm going to hire 2, this month I'm going to hire 1. Yeah, you put them into your business plan and you put them into your forecast. But the moment you write a forecast, it's wrong. Right? Anybody who's ever written a set of forecasts or budgets for the year, the moment you've written it, it's wrong. Right? But it just gives you something to track yourself by. I'm a people person. I believe I can get the most out of an individual. If you are a real recruitment leader and you're not one of those that feels you can do it better yourself just on your own, and maybe you'll get a few people around you and that gives you more, pence in your pound in your own pocket, I think that's the wrong reason to do it, because you're going to look back at 60 and wonder what you did with your life, because there's 3 or 4 of you who's, you might have dragged a few quid out, but it's not going to give you the satisfaction you think it's going to give you. If you're a real recruitment leader, you can make other people better at what they do. So every business I've started, I've just gone at it. So again, you look at Dream, 40 odd people in a year. Within Kellis, we had 40 odd people within 2 years. So don't limit yourself. Make sure you're getting people on a billing. Make sure that you get them up. But as soon as those billings start to wash their own face, you need to be adding, and you need to be adding 3s and 4s every single time you create competition between those individuals. Your training's easier to do because they've all got a measure. If one's doing a little bit better, the others have got to keep up. You'll always lose, maybe 1, maybe 2. And you'll see those that stay on feel they've earned that position, rather than one person getting all your energy or getting that energy from somebody else, because actually it's a real tough thing to then take them on in 1s and 2s and whatever else. It's far easier to do 3s and 4s. Actually, if you can do 5s and 6, brilliant. Not everybody's cash flow allows that. And the other thing I'd say is, we're hooked up on going for senior people all the time. Unless someone has specific domain knowledge that you don't have, leave them alone. Okay? Why, if they're any good, unless they've had a real fallout over shares, like myself or somebody else, if they're just leaving because you're going to offer them more in basic salary or slightly more in the commission, okay, that's the wrong reason for them to leave, because if they're very good at what they're doing, they're probably earning really good money, and you're going to pay more for less. Okay, it's just a standard rule of thumb. And I know, working my network group of over 130 agencies, if we were to look at that across all of those, I think the net gain is 0 on taking people of seniors and above. It's about domain knowledge. If you can then elevate them because they fill a gap and they've got a career path, fine. But once you've got the domain knowledge and you've got your structure, your culture, and you know that's a good place to be, start to train your own. Okay, and that's a big bit of advice. All my most successful people, by far, and I'm talking people who've built 6, 7, 800, 900,000 pounds. Okay, one young lady who worked for me just didn't want to be a salesperson. She did our customer care, and we had somebody walk out, and I brought her in. And actually, going back to your billing question, it was the only time I ever billed placing teachers. I had to step into the fold for a week and a half. And I did 16 contract deals. I'd just like to put that out there. So that really put a rocket up the backside of all of my consultants. It was like, well, how's he done that in 6 hours worth of work, right? We had the vacancies. I just closed people, just rang them up, told them what they were going to have, and we did the deals. And this young lady at the time said, I just, at the end of it, I can't work with this. It's just my head's going to explode. She told one of the other directors, I've got to leave. I need to go back to doing what I did before. I said, look, take some time. It's summer holidays. It's an education business. And when she came back, I said, all you need to do is all the things that I showed you to do over those few weeks, right? That's all you need to do. For the next 10 years, she was on average the top biller in the industry, always somewhere around £700,000 to £900,000 a year. Now, a few of us have, we get up to those 7 figures and we bill well, but, I look back and I think, well, maybe I was a flash in the pan, right? And you see a few people, rarely do you see people do that year in, year out, year in, year out. University grad, didn't know what she was going to do for a year, come in and did some customer care for us. If I said to her today, you're a really good salesperson. He said, I'm not a salesperson. Okay, so all my successful people over the years have been homegrown, and that would be my big bit of advice to anybody. There's no set time for that. Obviously, most people will have a 6-month probation period, and we'll look at that. I look at people on a daily, weekly basis, because you want to give them the best. You don't want to turn up 6 months' time and say, right, you haven't hit your numbers, or you haven't hit your KPIs, or you haven't done this, so let's shake hands and say goodbye. You've got to give everybody the best chance possible. My feeling is, generally, if you've got somebody, the one thing you can't give people, is very hard to give people, is commitment and work ethic. As long as they've got aptitude, the ability to learn on the job. It doesn't matter whether you've got a PhD and you join a recruitment company or you join anywhere, right? You still have to learn how to do your job, right? You still have to understand what that working environment's like. You understand their domain, the logistics of just moving around in the office and everything else, right? So there's always an embedding period. And what I've found, as long as you give people the most amount of input and allow them to make as many mistakes as possible in the first 3 months. And I always used to say to new consultants, as long as you don't swear at people, you don't threaten people, as long as you don't break the law, okay, you can't make many mistakes in this place. The more mistakes you make, the better you will be. And I want you to make as many mistakes as possible, okay? Not on purpose. I don't care. I don't care if you make bad calls or good calls, but I can't fix what I don't know is broken. So if you go out there and you hammer the phone and I sit with you, or your manager sits with you, or whoever sits with you, I'll get that feedback, and we'll sit there and we'll give you pointers and we'll nudge you along and we'll give you the things, and sooner or later you'll find your groove, because not all people are the same. If they were, we'd all wear grey suits or grey cardigans and talk the same, and it'd be really easy to hire staff, but you generally are a Mongol mix of your first sales environment, of all the good things that you took from different people. I definitely am. You know, I worked with some fantastic people, so I was very lucky. And I took something from everybody that I worked with, and I just mixed it up to make me in terms of my selling, and then added a little bit on top. So for me, as long as you can say that you've given it everything, if they're not giving the commitment and not giving the effort, I think it's time to call it a day. If they're still putting it in, they're putting the hours in, and they're breaking their back for you and for themselves, then you'll give them a bit longer. As I said earlier on, it's not for everybody. You know, there's always going to be some people who just say it's just not for me, but you'll sit down and have a conversation. I think generally it's not a conversation of you're fired. It's a conversation of what do you think? I'm struggling. I'm finding it really hard. No matter how much you help me, it's just not working out. And you shake hands. And that's been the majority of people who have left me over the years. It's a conversation. I suppose in the first business where I chose the commission scheme, it would have been Kellis. In that market, commission far better, but it was very much like an I suppose an IT recruitment consultancy at the time. £5,000 threshold, and then 10%, 15%, 20%, you know, in all the different brackets. Whereas from memory, I think a lot of the agencies back then paid £1 a day per teacher that worked, and all this sort of stuff. And their OTEs were 22 to 25. Basics were a little bit higher. Their basics were probably, oh God, this was 2002, so they were probably paying 18s. I was paying 12 to 15s, which seems like robbery, but then again, when I was on 10 at Computer Futures, I think back, why did I take that job? You know, I was earning 3 times that amount before I joined them. But it made it very, very aspirant. Everybody knew where they could get to, and so by the end of it, but oh God, 18 months in, I've got consultants earning £100,000 a year at 24 years old. And they're very successful. All the 2 people actually within 6 figures within that market. No one else was only 6 figures in education recruitment in the country at the time, right? And I didn't even know that until we were acquired. I had no idea. I just took a standard form into a market that I'd worked in before. They were driving, one had a Nissan, God knows why, a Nissan 350Z or 250Z or something, and the other one had a Porsche Boxer. They were in their very early 20s. Then one bought a 911. All these things that they think they should do, paying silly insurance. But these were education recruitment consultants. And I had to say, look, you can't turn up at a school in a 911 trying to sell a supply teacher. So I think actually we did take that down a bit when we got into a PLC, but I had no idea. But both of these guys I'm talking about struggled immensely to start off with. And I always remember, I split the room into teams. I never sat in my office. As most CEOs do, you have an office. I sat on the floor. I went in there when I had to make private phone calls that I couldn't let the floor hear, and that was generally have an argument with the wife. But yeah, most of the time I sat out on the floor. And these 2 guys were good, but they weren't great. And so I sat in between. I moved my chair in between them, and I just literally picked points of everything they did in a beat you up, build you up kind of way. And they went, within 3 months, they went from doing okay to shooting the lights out and becoming huge bidders. And both of those are directors of businesses at the moment, both millionaires as well. Yeah. So I like to say that I've created a few in my time as well. Yeah. If I don't know what's going on at the sales floor, if I don't know what's going on at the coalface, how can I make decisions at the top? I see that in so many different businesses. I see it especially medium-sized businesses, when they think they should step back from the floor, was it undermining their managers. When I was acquired by a big business where we had 300 staff and I became the CEO of that business, there was this hierarchical tendency to people to, oh, they're coming today, let's work a little bit harder, let's make sure the desks are clean and whatever else, right? Okay, why should that day be any different from any other day? I don't get that. It just doesn't sit with me in any way, shape or form. I created a flat management system. Everybody spoke to everybody, and so you didn't talk down to anybody. I spoke to my receptionist exactly the same way as I spoke to my chairman, and I would reprimand people who spoke down to people who were rude to people. I wanted everybody to feel they're on the same level because they're all part of that one machine. The bit the receptionist does is that, you know, when you walk in, if they greet you with a smile and they offer you a drink and they're really nice to you, your first impressions are great. And so everybody knew where they were in the business. And for me, I could walk the sales floor, not undermine my managers, have a conversation with the receptionist, the resourcer, the consultants, the managers, the directors, and that was fine. Nobody felt they needed to perform any differently because I was in a room. There was probably a margin of that, you know, it's natural. But it wasn't that, right, let's change everything we're doing today. I want everybody to pretend they're working hard. Because I would turn up in my offices, I would go and see everybody. We had an intranet where you could ask the CEO and it was anonymised, so I didn't know who it was. Any question that I could legally answer, because it would be a PLC, sometimes you can't, about the business, where we were going, you know, what they thought the plan was. And for the first few months, it was quite busy. You know, I got some very direct questions, and I gave direct answers. And all I can say, and I hope in terms of the feedback I now get from people who've worked for me, I get two sets of feedback. First, from the early days, were you were really hard on me, right? Okay, but I've blossomed, and everything I've done today, I feel like I owe you a lot for that, which is probably the nicest thing I hear, right? Okay, it makes you feel good, not your billings or whatever else, the things you can do for other people. And quite recently, actually, speaking to some people who have worked for me, saying to me, you know, the best thing about working for you was that what you saw was what you got. You told us as it was. Whether we liked it or didn't like it, we knew we got an honest answer. You'd always give us a solution. You'd always give us a way forward. And most of the time, or they say most of the time, I say all the time, it would work, right? And they would go and do it. And then you look back for rose-tinted glasses and say, why didn't I do it before? Because I'd help them push their boundaries. So you wouldn't have that if you didn't walk the floor and you didn't have that communication, you didn't have that relationship with all of your staff. You know, some, yes, you'll see more than others because of where you're based. But yeah, I think you have to be on the floor. Otherwise, I don't know what else you're doing. What would I do differently? It's a very hard one to answer, really, because I know a lot more now. But if I'd asked myself that question back then, I think I would probably think I knew more then. Just the way I was at the time. I don't think I'd have done anything else differently. You know, I really loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I had an amazing environment. I had an amazing lifestyle. There wasn't anything that I could turn around and say I didn't enjoy about that time, except for the sale. Okay, I didn't like the sale. I didn't like then having other people interfering with my business. And I've not enjoyed that. I've not enjoyed that since being working for PLC, turning that business around, having private equity and boards involved and whatever else. For me, they're number engineers. They've never started a business. They don't necessarily understand business. They'll sell you to another PE house and engineer your numbers to make out they paid a different multiple and get multiple arbitrage, because I know you like that word, Steve, through scale. So it's a side of the industry that's there, and it's necessary, and it's just what we do and have to do. But I can't honestly say I engage with it and enjoy it that way. Even now, when I look at when I invest in businesses, I really enjoy being involved in that business and talking to the entrepreneurs who run those businesses on a daily basis and answering anything I can or doing anything I can for those businesses. For me, if I can't be involved in it, I don't understand it, then I would never invest in it. And that's how private equity felt for me. They're using other people's money and a bit of banks' money, a tiny bit of their own skin in the game. So that I just didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy what I thought it was, and then actually what I found out it was. So other than that, honestly, I would not change a thing. I'd probably bought a few more fast cars. Not really, but other than that, it was fantastic time. I think you've got to have momentum. When you've got momentum, it's easy. A lot of people stop, start. They get to 6, they get to 7, they come back down to 4 or 5, they get to 9, they come back to 7 or 8, and we see lots of businesses doing that all the time. The worst thing in life for me is to look back and say, do you know what, if I'd tried a bit harder, or if I'd worked a bit more, and I'd done this a little bit differently, what could have been? I think if you look back and go, do you know what, I gave it 100%, and that's as good as it got at the time. Yes, now I know this, but that's a mistake. I think you're going to be far more successful than somebody who's just doing it as they can. My big bit of advice is, if you're going to go for it, right? There's ways of running a business. You can either be niche and charge lots of money, or you can have a race to the bottom. You're more likely to be in recruitment middle of the road. You know, I've done talks to recruitment entrepreneurs, 60, 70, 80 CEOs in a room, and they kind of all sit there at the moment because the market's been good for 4 or 5 years, saying, do you know what, I'm doing all right. And my question I threw out to a group of people were, so who's doing all right? Everyone put their hand up. Who's doing great? A few people didn't know whether they were doing great. You know, a few more hands went up. Who's better than everyone else in the room? Right? No, not a hand went up, right? Not a hand went up. And I said, who's giving it full beans? Who's giving it everything that they got, throwing it at the market right now? I said, because I'm not, you know, the market's been great for 4 or 5 years. While the market's great, we're all superstars, right? We're all superstars, we're all brilliant at what we do, and we're far better than anybody else, and we do it differently. And we're successful because we use our left hand rather than our right hand or whatever else, right? But when the market turns, it's the market's fault. Right? It's not your fault, it's nobody else's fault. Your salespeople aren't good enough, or they've let you down, or whatever else, right? And my advice is, we do work in a really, really cyclical market, right? You know, recruitment goes up and it goes down, and that's one of those things that we will live with. It's been quite a long period, extended period of growth for us, and a real high employment market, so that's been quite good. But if you're not giving it 120% every single day, so that you're living on an edge, because you know, the horrible thing about a market, but also the nice thing about a market, is you have an asset you can cut really quickly, people, okay? So if you're 15, 20, 25% ahead of your peer group, and the market turns and they're struggling because they haven't got a plan, they haven't got momentum, and you still need some slowing down, and you get back and you drop off and you either get to parity or you get 10% above, you're still winning, right? Because everyone else is going backwards. If you're not doing that, then you may be asking yourself some questions when the market turns. So if you're going to start a business, don't start it half-heartedly. You have to go in guns blazing, knowing what you're doing, okay, and grow as quickly as you can. You know, I wouldn't put a bad bum on a seat. You know, I'd prefer to leave a seat open and have a bad person there, or somebody that just isn't going to fit the bill. One of the things that, going back to big billers, that I've let big billers go. Okay, if a big biller becomes a mood hoover and they're a problem within your team, and you're looking at them, and I see this all the time, you know, across our groups, but they bill 500, 600, £700,000, and everyone else is like on 150 and whatever else. But if you look at it, if you remove that mood hoover, right, you'll probably maintain some of that business. You might retain none of that business, right? But you generally will some. You will watch everybody else. You won't get rid of them on a Monday, and that business goes back to where it should be on a Tuesday. But over a period of time, the atmosphere is better. Those people will make up the differences. So maybe they'll start to bill £200,000 or £225,000 a year, and across the board, that's a better risk profile for your business. They all make up the difference. You onboard people far easier. You can chuck them into the mix. They're learning from all these great people rather than having this cloud sit over there. So make sure you're scaling at the pace you can scale with the right people, with the right aptitude. But if you get to a point, especially when you've got really big biller and you've got your eggs in one basket, you have to nip that in the bud quite quickly. You either deal with that individual and say to them, look, you're getting a bit above your station, or you're not working within our culture, or you have to say goodbye. I think the key differentiator for us was origination and innovation. I looked at the market, looked at how it was done, took some ideas from other places, and really believed in how I could change things. Not just like bums on seats, but it was a real bums on seats trade. There was no care for quality, no care for who turned up and how they administered themselves on the day and whatever else. So we took the quality side a step further, we took the clearance side a stage further. We looked at the retention, not just the recruitment, because you don't want to burn bridges in these relationships. So we went into schools and we understood their onboarding process, we understood their finance process, we understood their peer groups, we did environment mapping, we looked at their time audits, who was involved in recruitment, and we slowly sliced and diced the way they did the recruitment within the schools and how they onboarded and things they looked for. Because there's a huge amount of bias in schools in how they recruit. Well, I've got someone who looks like that, so they must be a good teacher. Or we like rugby at this school, so that person's played rugby, so we'll have them. And they don't really create the diverse, engaged environments that reflect their charges. You know, the children that are there on a daily basis. And it's still rife. It's still not great. But we went in and we addressed that, and we did it differently. And I think from the back of that, we got relationships, but we also got a knowledge base that others didn't have, and that was something we could leverage. And we were quick to do that. We were quick to innovate, quick to originate, come up with things that still mainstay today in terms of education recruitment, saving schools money, up in quality, but still running a very profitable business ourselves. I found within IT, yeah, you know, buzzwords were king back then, and I was really, really good at joining up other people's sentences, and what I'd heard from Dave, I'd tell to Phil, and then Phil to Sally, and whatever else, right? And that worked, and that was good for me. And then once I started to understand a little bit more, I actually watched my billings go up. So as soon as I got into education recruitment, my knowledge was zero. So other than being at school, and that's quite a nice thing to already understand the levels of a market, because we've all been through school. So that bit was quite an easy transition, obviously. But going in and understanding how the government worked, understanding how funding to the Department for Education worked, the hierarchy worked, everything else, was key to us. And then looking at new bits of legislation or policy that had come out, because there are loads, it's weekly in education. And schools don't always keep up to date with that. So by being a conduit for that information to the schools, by being able to sit there with a group of head teachers, and not, you know, I was never ever think I could tell somebody how to deliver a lesson, because I couldn't. But I could sit there and talk about how their budgets worked, and I could sit there and talk about recruitment and human capital and onboarding and processes from the reflection in terms of what policy required, reflection in terms of what they were doing, and how we could join those up to make those cost efficient and effective. And every week, without fail, once or twice, we would sit down and I would just brain dump in terms of all my consultants, and we'd test them as well. Every Friday had a test. So in terms of the education magazines that were out, everybody had to read it, you all were tested on it, and some of those were multiple choices on bits of paper, some of those were just spot tests, but without fail, every week I tested my consultants on the market. Besides feeling a bit winded from doing it, a week and a half in, we found out the main investing PE house, because it was an AIM-listed business, had rolled in their loan notes for shares because they felt very excited and comfortable with us, this new education recruitment company that they just acquired. And we were the last acquisition. They'd been acquiring businesses for the previous 3 years, and at the time they had about 9 businesses, some quite small, medical, social care and education. So it's called a public sector recruitment group. 2 weeks after that, they issued a 2-year profit warning. Business was held up with provisions and dodgy profits. Then 2 weeks after that, they got rid of the chairman. So we'd got some shares in this deal, and we watched those shares go down, down, down. And that was a kick in the teeth. So a few weeks later, I was approached by the CEO of the group, who decided to tell me that they were in a really bad way. And actually, if they hadn't have bought us, the bank would have probably foreclosed on them, because they needed that profit to their line to pay off their debts, which is really nice to hear. That suddenly we've got 30 million quid worth of debt and we don't know how to deal with it, because they just rebanked. So, but to buy us, but that's not going to make me feel any better, because I've still got shares and loan notes within this business. So over the next couple of months, we discussed what we might do, and the decision was made to then make me MD of that whole business. So I then come in across all these people I'd never met before and become their MD. And that would have been 2006. So a lot of businesses were having a really bad year. 2007 actually wasn't a bad year at all. In terms of the other education businesses, had their best years ever. And I like to think that was down to me. But we created a bit of a force, and it worked really well. The medical business with PASS at the time was struggling, and I'm quite open in saying I didn't realise immediately, but it became apparent after about 3 or 4 months. There was a board within a board. There was a Machiavellian set of people on that board who were basically setting it up to take the offices, and I didn't really join the dots until they did it. But it kind of, you look at what had gone on in the previous kind of year and a half. So April brought on a very seasoned entrepreneur and investor many would know called Luke Johnson. Luke was chairman of Channel 4 at the time. I brought Luke on. Luke put about £5.5 million in. That helped. We got rid of the medical company, sold that to HCL. That helped. So we managed to pay off with the facilities as well, about £13 million all in one go. Okay, so that gave us a little bit of a breathing space. So into 2007, 2008, with that, the previous board went, but within 6 months, they'd taken, because it was originally a northern office, they'd taken about, eventually 9 of our offices, which was about £2 million from our bottom line. Really, really hard to do anything about it. You know, their legals and their covenants, which had been set up before, kind of allowed them to do it. And I think what they had hoped was, they've chucked the keys to the car to this white boy who thinks he's doing well. It's going to crash. They're going to be off aim. They're going to pick up the rest of the business for next to nothing. And that was probably one of the main reasons I stayed. And obviously the moral side of bringing in an investor and telling them what I thought was true at the time, but actually it was a bag of spanners. Right? And it was a business that years later, actually, I got a real nice comment from somebody in a kind of reverse way at a very well-known law firm, and I sat on a world leaders, recruitment leaders dinner. He said to me afterwards, do you know what? When you took over as CEO of that business, no one had heard of you. We knew it was a bag of spanners, and you know, we used to take bets for when it would go under. And he said, and for 4 years you were top of the list, right? Which businesses would go under this year, right? And you were top of the list. And he said, I've got to say, absolutely never seen a business come back from the precipice the way you did. And grow it, pay off all the debt, and eventually sell that business. So we had some amazing struggles. And looking back, another reason not to have sold my business, it wasn't as enriching as anywhere as it could have been financially. I learned a lot, you know, from running a nice little P&L to being chucked into a business where you've got institutions and shareholders, and you're dealing with banks in business support because you're over leveraged. I know you like that word. Again, just in terms of you had more debt than the money you were making. You have exotic hedges and swaps and collars and cuffs and all these things that you're sitting there in meetings going, right, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about, but everybody expects you to know everything from day one. So moving into that was the baptism of fire and probably one of the biggest learning experiences of my life. And I like to, you know, I've come out the back end of it and I've learned a hell of a lot. I don't know whether I'd do it again. I made some big mistakes right at the beginning. Purely, probably ego didn't allow me to reach out to people and ask them questions. There was things I got but didn't fully understand in terms of what we were doing in the business. You know, I was moving into 2 sectors I'd never done before, and I was getting those bits of information, but I was also listening to the wrong people. So I was a southern-based business. This was a northern-based business that acquired us. Majority of their offices were northern-based. I'd had an office in Watford, London. I had an office in Canada and an office in Australia, and I did a lot of work in Dubai. And none of that really fitted with Newcastle, Sunderland, and Middlesbrough and some other places. So my tonality was very different. The business was very different. They were very soft in terms of the way they sold. So I listened to some of the other senior people in the business, and they said, right, we've got to keep this person. We've got to keep that person. And really looking back, well, actually 2 years later, I kind of figured this out, that it was protectionism. They were keeping their crews together. They were keeping the people, and they knew if that person stayed, that I would be all right, and whatever else. And there's an entrepreneur called Eric Pickles. I actually went to a lunch once, and I thought I was sitting next to Eric Pickles, the MP, being a public sector, but it wasn't. It was another guy who works in insurance. And I was talking to him, and I was saying to him, do you know what? I've just got rid of all these people, and I did. I got rid of a lot of people, got rid of directors and managers, and I cut them loose. And I said, and for 2 years, I've known it was the right thing to do, that they've been damaging the business, they're insidious, the things they're saying, that anything that's going wrong, they're blaming other people. Education is quite a playground mentality, right? So people do reflect their markets. And we ended up talking at this lunch, and because we'd had this conversation, he said it was something he learned very early on in his career, and bear in mind he's probably about 70 odd, that when he bought a business many years ago, that he'd listened to the management about keeping certain people when his gut feel was they weren't right. Okay, but he had no science behind that, and that was one of the things that I think I should have done earlier, so it was a mistake. And then I looked at the business. We'd lost 9 offices. we'd sold the medical business. We were a much smaller business. We were throwing all our cash off to pay off the debt. The banks were being really, really awful with us. Getting towards 2010, comprehensive spending review. We were going through a credit crunch as well. Banks hate everybody, and you know, even to rebank us was £500,000. So they were being really, really unhelpful. As much as they could be. We had some dodgy swaps at the time, but couldn't really fully pay for the investigation because you had to get people to look at those. So we had a lot of stuff going on that didn't allow us to hire more people. And as we've spoken about, when you grow a recruitment company, you hire more people, right? You get rid of the bad people and you take on the good people. So we became the headhunter's dream. Really good consultants in a down market. So the market was down about 20% at the time as well. If your market's down 20%, your consultants are down about 40% in commission because they're dropping out of brackets. So somebody else turning up who's a little bit cash rich can take consultants. I lost nearly all my London office to another business. And it was purely because I couldn't offer them any more money. I just didn't have the cash in the bank. I went without salary at points in time. And you can't defer because the way your covenants are, you just don't get paid. You know, I'm CEO of a business not getting paid that I can essentially walk from, and I'm a shareholder in. But it was my duty, and that was, you know, I would prefer that we had an engaged workforce than I got paid, and then the bank come in and made it a darker place to work. So when I'd kind of figured this stuff out, which I should have done 2 years before, I should have listened to my own instincts, I decided enough was enough, okay? I picked a few people that I thought weren't good, called them in, where HR was saying, you can't just get rid of them, you can't do this. And I sat down and I said, look, here's a letter from me that says, if you bring a claim against this business, it's on my head, right? Okay, I'll give you that letter, but let's have a pure conversation about you and your career and your future. This isn't working out. You know, I don't think you're enjoying it. You can't enjoy running around doing the things you're doing. Did that with a couple of people, shook hands, they went, not a problem, right? And as I've said before, people normally know where it's not the right place to work. I brought in every manager from the country, so about 20 odd people were running offices, in my boardroom in London, and I had a charter that I'd drawn up. And on this charter was initially all the things I was going to do for them. So they all read this, and I put down, first thing was, just like me, my phone has never been off. Okay, you can phone me from 5 o'clock in the morning, because my phone's up then. Any earlier, although I do get up, I'd probably wake my wife up. You can phone me from 5 o'clock in the morning to midnight, any day of the week, with any problem you've got. Okay, and I went through all of the other things. I will come to schools with you. I will sit in presentations with you. I will come and personally sales train your staff if you need it. I know, put all these different things that I will always give to them as a business, and I will be honest and whatever else. They quite like that. Okay, so I'm going to say, please flip that charter over, and these are all the things that I expect from you. Now, you don't have to accept this, and it doesn't mean you're getting fired. It means you're probably not right for that position. You can step sideways and you can do something else. I'm not even going to reduce your salary. Okay, you can be a consultant. You can leave if you think this isn't the place for you, because we are under the cosh, but I need an engaged workforce. And I promise you, I will do all those things for you if you do these things for me. Actually, I'll do those unconditionally. This is my expectation. And at that point in time, we'd managed to sell a loss-making social care business, which the VMSs were crushing, and it was losing about £700,000 a year. So we managed to get rid of that business, and for about £1.5 million, which helped pay down the debt. And it gave us a little bit of cash breathing space to do a few things within our business. And I removed pretty much all the directors because they weren't selling. And go back to my original point, if you're not selling, don't know what you're doing. You can't go from office to office patting everyone on the back or telling them it's going to be all right, or dealing with the problems from the office the day before while you sit in the next office. That's not right. You need to be doing something positive to engage that workforce. From 2011 to 2015 or 14, we sold in 15 or 14's numbers. Besides taking about a little bit of churn from the first 6 months, I didn't grow my head count one iota. Didn't add another person. I found other ways to make people better, so therefore our consultants were at least a third better than anybody else in the industry. But we did grow our profits 20%, 58%, 25%, 35%. Okay, without hiring another person, because we just didn't have the cash. So by the time we sold the business, that £30 million debt was nothing. Okay, and actually when we sold the business, we did better than we thought we'd do, and the people acquiring the business had a price they'd pay. So money had to be dispersed in other ways rather than actually in the sale of the business. So my key point there in turning around the business was that I put myself out there, I engaged with the people that could make a difference, and I went to them directly. For the offices, I had a really, really good ops director with me as well. Great FD, great team in the back office, everything run like clockwork. And I took my 4 best, or what I perceived to be my best offices, or the most potential, and they come direct to me. There was no manager in between them, no director in between them, no business development area type individual, just me. And most of them I doubled within the next 18 months in terms of their billings and contribution to the company. So engage with your people. If you want to turn something around, be there. Roll your shirt sleeves up and get involved. We sold the business for essentially what would have been about 25 million quid. So it was a business that we took from what should have been about 7 million EBIT, but with the provisions and everything else that was going on when it was first acquired us, really was sitting around about 4 and a bit for just nearly 5. We had some really poor parts of the business. Over the years, getting rid of those parts of the business, we got down to about 1. And when you get down to about 1, it's a scary place to be from 97 million turnover. But you know, turnover is vanity and profit sanity, and or cash is sanity. But you know, but where we were in profit terms didn't necessarily matter that we'd reduced the turnover. We just stripped down and rebuilt. So I suppose if it was a private company selling today, because we had to work in terms of still with the AIM-listed rules, although we're delisted, you'd be adding back and you'd be about 4.5 million EBIT. I enjoyed the second exit. It was time to go. I had a board that weren't going to let me invest in the business and do the things I need to. Although I was a material shareholder in that business, I wasn't the only shareholder. And post exit, I didn't feel the same way that I missed my people. Don't get me wrong. I had some great people there, and I do miss that. I miss seeing them and working with them. But I don't miss a private equity board environment whatsoever. So as soon as I came out there, we obviously had the Recruitment Directors Lunch Club that I've been running with Gary Goldsmith on the side, so to speak, which had grown to about 30, 40 agencies by that time. We're now 140 agencies, so that's gone phenomenally well. And I've really enjoyed that, because I think when I look back at my career, what I've really enjoyed is working with individuals and giving a bit of knowledge, learning a bit from them, working out a better solution, and I get to do that every day now. I've invested in some really good rec tech. A funny one called SourceBreaker. I don't know what they do, but that seems to be a fantastic business. Plus another couple of bits, and I've had my own platform built. Also done a lot of advisory. I've worked with some government departments in how to restructure some of their recruitment and look at the behavioural science behind recruitment, because I think the future we need to understand that it's not just bums on seats, it's matching people, not in terms of just competencies and skills and CVs. It's more behaviours and situations, and right people, right jobs, and making sure that peer groups become better with the sum of the parts being greater than the whole. And I've done a lot of that over the last couple of years. So yeah, really enjoyed myself, and I've learnt a lot as well. Earned nothing, so which has been new. But yeah, actually, it's been almost like a recruitment sabbatical. I've learnt a lot and worked with a lot of people, so it's been good fun.